Well, good afternoon.
Clicker
I'm gonna
over
do,
there at the end of the table.
Thank you. I'm gonna move this mic around just a little bit, so I'm hoping I don't create any noise there when I do that. So, good afternoon. Thank you all for tuning in here this afternoon. I know you've had a long day so far, and I think we've got a break slated right after this session. So I will do my best to try to keep us on time and get us into that break, but do have some things I definitely want to bring to some folks' attention. I know I've gotten a lot of people's attention here in the last week and a half or so by sending out some emails. Just to kind of preface before we start with this, just let me say that a lot of you all have received emails within the last week and a half or so that list the number of records that we can see from each school in the district. We're doing that more as a, hey, make sure that these are done prior to the June 30th deadline. So when you get that email from me saying you have 2 records in this school, or you have 4 records in this school, or no records are showing, that's more of a, hey, here's a reminder, because what we found was that some folks were kind of counting on some legislation to take the reporting requirement away, and that did not happen. So just wanted to say that that's actually the reason we're sending those out. And anytime you get a report from me, it's a friendly report. So don't freak out because you get something from me. So, all righty, so we're going to talk this afternoon, first of all, about the required users of the tab. And I do want to make some clarification here for you all. And first of all, and I've gotten quite a bit of feedback on this in the last week and a half or so. All ESS students have to be documented in the tab. That's daytime and out of school. All schools, whether A1 or A6, all students are required to receive ESS services. Now, a student in an A6 school may receive the services from their A1 school or an A1 school close to wherever they're attending. But they do all have to receive ESS services in some way, shape, form, or fashion. So I know I've gotten a lot of feedback from folks saying, but our kids don't do ESS. The legislation says that all students are supposed to receive ESS services in the state of Kentucky. So document or have access to, let me just put it that way, have access to ESS services. So if you've got a child who's at an A6 school, or if you've got the summer program through KSIS, that's also that ESS component. So those students need to be input into the tab under the ESS summer data, which has that separate submission date of September 30th. Another one here, all 12th graders. And I want to reiterate here that says all 12th graders. That includes your kids in your A6 schools. So all 12th graders are required to be entered into the tab. We've gotten a lot of folks saying they necessarily weren't aware. That has been a requirement for quite a long time now. So I'm going in and just double checking. Guys, I'm happy to help you all in any way, shape, form, or fashion if any of your folks are not necessarily aware of that. But the only thing being, we've had a couple calls from some of the regional detention centers. If those kids are in there on a transient basis, less than 7 days, then they don't have to be put in there. You can pull your benchmark report, though, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute, so that it tells you exactly who you have to document in the intervention tab. But again, that's all 12th graders who did not meet benchmark in the state. All novice students in 3-year plus focus schools. And getting some clarification on this from our friends with the focus school division, they have told me that this is everyone who was in focus school status at the end of last year is still in that focus status this year. So you're required to enter all novice students in the school into the intervention tab. And finally, all MAF and RTA students, Mathematics Achievement Fund and Read to Achieve students, are required to be entered. So one quick reminder here, this is not necessarily related to the tab, but I was asked to share this. K3 through House Bill 69, remember that you are still required to document the interventions in reading, math, and behavior through the assurance statement. That's one of the pieces of the program review that still remains in effect. You are still required to document, not in the tab, but through the assurance statement from your buildings in the program review, that you do have those records on reading, math, and behavior in K3 schools. All righty, now we're going to go on to the tab. So, at this point, and I've contacted all of these districts, 7 districts do not have any data entered into the intervention tab. That's as of our April 7th poll. That's the last time we did a statewide poll. At this point, we have at about 12% of the records that are forecast to end in the future. So they're saying for the most part, they're already projecting that they're going to exit intervention May 25th through 30th. That's where we're seeing the majority of our dates. Remember that a record is only supposed to be ended at either A, the time the child exits the intervention, or B, at the end of the school year. So again, at the time the child exits the intervention or at the end of the school year. Those are the 2 dates we should see. Some folks have already forecast that they are going to exit in a month from now. So you need to leave those blank until that child either A, exits, or B. If you're within the last week of school, we're okay with you going ahead and putting those end dates in. But we have folks in October who are putting end dates, who in October put the end dates in for May, forecasting that exit from intervention. Code 3 is the bane of my existence. Code 3 is only to be used when a child is entering or remaining in the same intervention from year to year. So it's only to be used with a date corresponding to the last day of school, and they're continuing in the same intervention, in the same tier, in the same content in the 2017-18 school year. That's the only time that code is to be used. I will tell you that in the next incarnation of the intervention tab, the wording is a little bit different on this code to try to keep this from being misunderstood. But continuing intervention is only to be used at the end of the school year when that child is continuing in the same intervention, in the same content, in the same tier in the following school year.
Jared, a district's asking,
Yes.
is it okay if during the last 2 weeks of school, they start putting in dates?
Perfectly fine, perfectly fine. What we want to talk about more than anything, Becky, is people who are putting it in.
Months in advance.
October, November. I mean, I've had people in July put in that they're going to exit May 15th. It's a little hard to know exactly how a child's going to perform at that time. So, yeah, that's perfectly fine. I do my quarterly polls. I'm in the midst right now. I'm looking at 40 districts at the moment and looking at their data right now and sending out the third quarter reviews.
I don't think it works.
So, let's look at what we're looking at right now. Last year, we had 357,000 intervention records statewide. As of the 7th of this month, we had 627,000 records. Of those, 10%, about 21,000, had blank records. 193, this is a big win for Lisa Keeter and I, that these content areas are much better than they used to be. So we don't have that content mixed. In other words, you don't have other and then reading and math listed over to the side under other. Remember that if you've done that, you have to separate those out into 2 separate records. So reading has to have its own record, math has to have its own record. Now, there might be a tier 2 and a tier 3 reading, there might be a tier 2 and a tier 3 math. That's perfectly okay. And they should have different entry and exit dates, hypothetically, or could be the same. It really depends on the situation. Tier is blank. Remember that tier is required on these records, and we've got about 18% of those that are blank right now. Listed as a type 1 course without course code, 11%. Indated without results, about 7%. And finally, our folks who have ESP, and 7% of those are in the future. This is probably, when I talk to districts and schools, this is probably the most invaluable piece that we have. This is what I send to a district typically when I get a question. This lists every single thing on the intervention tab that I am going to take a look at when I review the records for a district. Notice, these are all the required pieces: start date, tier status, intervention type, intervention content area, materials code if you've got a vendor code if you're 5 vendor code on your intervention materials, intervention staff, delivery location, delivery method, frequency, duration, and then finally, to finalize those records out, all of that plus end date, service results, and total hours entered. Once you've done that, you can stick a fork in it. You're completely and totally done. You can move on. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. Just keep on going. So I would share this I've shared this with a lot of folks, because I think this is probably the piece that most people understand. Once you've looked at this screenshot, people tend to be able to do the records correctly. So I would encourage you to go ahead and download this, share this with your people, because if they call me or email me, this is what I'm going to probably send them back. Now, we do have the data standard, obviously, that has it in detail, but this is what most people want to know, is what needs to be done, or what needs to be completed.
Is it permissible for a Tier 1 student to have a blank tier?
No, it has to be, that was required as of about 3 years ago. You have to put the tier in the actual record. And there's some older documentation I know that's floating out there that says you do not have to document the tier. That changed in 2014. So we want to make sure that you're entering tier in there. These are all required in that piece. We'll make sure you don't have any more questions, Becky.
Nope. You're good to move on.
All righty. So just a couple of kind of pieces of information here. One of the things we're saying is that if people are entering one course, they're not entering that state course code. Also, if you're selecting vendor program or vendor provided service, then you have to enter a vendor code. Now, I've included the link down here, and you all can get this from, obviously, from the PowerPoint, to our Infinite Campus Intervention tab page, and that's where we keep the codes for all the vendor codes on that page. There's also, in the same document, a listing of all state course codes. So all the codes you need are going to be on that intervention or Infinite Campus Intervention tab page. If for some reason that you get on there and you don't see whatever intervention is being offered in your district, let's say that you're working with ABC Math and you don't see that on the vendor code list, all you have to do is email me and say, we're using ABC Math. I don't see it on the list of vendors. Can you please add it to the code list? It takes me, depends, usually within a couple of hours. I've got it back to you. Becky and Lisa get to assign those codes in IC. I assign those codes, I send them to them, and it gets published out that way. So it's very easy for you to correct something or to add something to the list. All right, so again, all fields are required down to the comment boxes, and that goes back to that page we had just a moment ago. This is where we're talking about combining subject areas. If you cannot combine multiple subject areas in one record. You have to have a separate math, a separate science, a separate reading, and a separate English record in there per tier. Because what we have is a lot of people is they want to put one reading and then over to the side put math under the content other. That requires that you create an entirely new record in order to capture that. Otherwise, we have no idea of how many hours that child spent in reading, how many hours that child spent in math. And we're required to report that data out to the Legislative Research Commission and to the Commissioner. So that's why it's so important that we keep those separate. If a content area is not provided for you, then you may choose option 8 and you just type in what that content area is. So well, we see a lot of foreign language in there. We see a lot of physical education. We might see something on under the behavior tab. They might type a specific type that they want to use under 7 behavior. That's okay, just as long as you're not combining multiple content areas under that same record. All right, let's talk about optional items in the tab for everyone except for MAF and RTA. As you see here on the screen, everything here is optional, including funding. Now, your district may require you to enter funding into this box. We do not require it at the state level. We do not promulgate that information. We do not gather that information. We do not do anything with that information. So that's for a district use only, but it was added as a result of request from district. RTA and MAF do require completion of the skills checklist. So if you put anything in either one of these comments boxes or anything on these 2 pages, we're not going to look at it except for MAF or RTA records for the state. Now, districts may, as I said, may make policies about how often to update records, such as the total hours served. However, KDE requests, not requires, request that they be opened at the beginning of the intervention. It's just a rule of thumb. You do not have to do it. It's just a lot of folks find that if they can enter it throughout the year, it's a lot easier than waiting till the end of the year and mass inputting all these records into the system. All records need to be closed at the end of the intervention or at the end of the school year or the end of the year. Every single record has to have an exit date and a results code. Every single record has to have an end date and a results code. That results code might be a 3 continuing intervention. However, that is a result. So again, you can put either your last day of school or you can put June 30th, whichever one you choose. And that's the reason it says school year / end of year. So again, you can choose, but it does have to be end dated. We cannot have any records without an end date on them. You can't leave that blank. They have to all be end dated. Focus schools may have also additional requirements set forth by our folks with the Focus School Division, and contact your program managers if you're unsure of these requirements. Now, here's one thing that we find, and I know our KSIS folks are here today. A lot of our folks in districts are coming back at this time of year saying, we don't have rights to input the records. So I'm having to say you need to contact your person in your district to get rights to enter the records. And even if they have those rights, a lot of times they're saying, I can't delete a record because I entered something in by accident. Again, that's one of those rights that has to be assigned to them. And we're getting a lot of calls from folks saying, you know, why can't I do this? And I have to always refer them back to you folks. So if you wouldn't care, if you know somebody in your district is the person entering or working with this data, just double check what their permissions say so that they can get the job done. It is completely and totally permissible to delete a faulty record. Not a problem whatsoever. Matter of fact, last year where there were 357,000 records, the team and I corrected 34,000 plus of those for issues, for data quality. So again, your KSIS system administrator may delete or give you rights to delete. Now, how do you double check your records? And particularly for our ESS folks too, they actually sign a piece of paper that says, I have checked all my records and there's nothing wrong with them. I had somebody by accident this morning submit a county's district. Now I know he's probably out there watching because I told him I was doing this at 2 o'clock. And I did a complete check of his records, all 2,000 plus, and found that there were about 700 with missing tiers. There were about 1,100 with missing codes, only to find out that a teacher had accidentally submitted that on his behalf. So, but that's okay. It's okay. I told him, I said, you got a free look. So if you're in your district here and you want to pull your reports, number one, if you're at the high school level and you want to know who has to be documented in that intervention tab for that 12th grade requirement in any school, again, that's A6, that's A1s, that's whomever, pull that benchmark report. Choose English, 12th grade, choose math, 12th grade, choose reading, 12th grade, and it will give you an Excel sheet that tells you exactly who has met and who hasn't met the benchmark standard at the 11th grade. So that tells you verbatim exactly who has to go into and be documented in that intervention tab. So what you're going to do is click on Kentucky State Reporting, KDE Reports, and then finally, to check your PLP Intervention tab data, you're going to click on PLP Intervention Data. And that's going to give you this page. And a lot of people want to put current date on this for the records they pull. And I can tell you that somebody sitting across the room from me fell victim to that not too long ago. A larger district that starts with the letter C, right, Jennifer? That's, well,
Me under the bus
I,
there.
I know.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome, you're
Big
welcome.
track.
And actually, that was on our part here at KDE, so that had nothing to do with Jennifer. Someone had pulled this and put the wrong date of the pull in what they pulled. So we had a little bit of a fun time there a couple weeks ago. But anyway, make sure that you're always putting the first day of your school year, the last day of the fiscal year, I guess I should say. The first day of the fiscal year, the last day of the fiscal year. So 7/1/16 to 6/30/17. Notice you can also select intervention types. You can look at just ESS data. You can look at just credit recovery, just MAF or RTA. If you're at the district level, obviously you want to leave that with all unless you're an ESS coordinator. Leave everything as you see here on the screen. I always just pull all grades and then use Excel to sort of look at those on an individual basis, and they click Generate Report. That'll give you a nice Excel report that will be generated to check your data, and you can sort that by name, date, whatever you need to do to make sure that there are no missing fields. If you're working with your ESS coordinators, we kindly ask that you double check their records or help them double check their records. As like I said, 357,000, and there are 4 of us to check all 357,000 records. So we would greatly appreciate it if you would double check that. That would be very nice. All right. Common data entry errors, intervention type, content area. They list multiple content areas marked as other. Other selections should be explained. Code 3 should only be used when a student is continuing in that intervention in the 17-18 school year, and you must have a start, end date, service result, and total hours by June 30th. Final data pool. Everything has to be in there with the exception of summer school, ESS, by June 30th, 2017. And again, summer school will be pulled in right after September 30th. So, here's a question we get a lot of times. So, why do I see records from a previous school in my new school? Why are you contacting me about that silly record? Because the record follows the child. The record follows the child. So if, for instance, you have a child who starts out the year in RTA in school A, and they transfer to school C within your district, that is going to show that school C has 2 or 3 RTA records, because that child was enrolled in RTA at the beginning of the school year in school A, but school C might not be an RTA school. So again, the record follows the child throughout the year. And student changes schools from district to district. Right now, Mike, I'm saying that very pointedly, we cannot transfer records from the intervention tab from district to district. So you have to print that out, put that along with the progress monitoring, put that in the cumulative folder, and send that to the new school. And hopefully someone on the other end sees that cumulative folder and continues that child in intervention. So again, that's how it works right now. I'm crossing my fingers and my toes.
And that's because it's a custom tab.
Yeah, it's because it's a custom tab.
You know, KDE has opted to use the custom tab for tracking rather than the RTI module, so as long as we
Well,
do that, it's, huh?
RTI module doesn't transfer either.
yeah.
But I mean, as long as we do the custom tab, that's unique to Kentucky.
Yeah.
So it will probably never transfer, so
Well,
it does have to be processed.
We're crossing our fingers and our toes that might change before too long, so let's just put it that way.
Not from the custom tab.
No, not from the custom tab, no.
Yeah, no.
So let's just say we're crossing our fingers and toes that changes somewhere down the line, so. All righty, so if we have any questions, more information, I've done this fairly quickly.
Don't see any questions online. Looks like Mindy has one.
So at the end of the school year, if a student hasn't met the goal,
Yes.
and maybe you don't know for sure that they're going to continue in that intervention next year,
you would have to use your best judgment at that point to either A, continue them, or B, end them. And that's what we, when someone calls us and asks us, that's how we answer, Mandy, is we say, do you really think, when in doubt, continue them.
Okay.
When in doubt, continue them. So that, and what it does is it says, we need to take a look at these kids when they come in the fall to see kind of where they stand. That's more of where it is than anything.
Okay.